There's this new thing going on in today's world where people try to squeeze God into this box, limited to only their own imaginations and expectations of him. They stick him in that box and they hide him away and only pull him out when they need or want something. They rub the surface of the box in their hour of need like a genie or a magic 8-ball. See, in their minds, God is only relevant for the big problems. The someone's dying, I'm about to lose my house, God help me, I spent all of my rent money and I need to have money in the bank by the time that check goes through. But the small stuff, God doesn't need to be involved in that. God doesn't care what job I work or how I decorate my home. He doesn't care that I'm crying, that I'm upset, that I want to get married, that I want to have children, I want to get that promotion at work. That stuff isn't important to God. I don't need to go to God with that. Now, if someone is about to die, or if I'm about to lose the house that I didn't ask God for, or the job that I didn't consult God about before taking, then I'll go to him with the big stuff. That's how people are thinking nowadays. Or worse, they're the people that tuck God into their God boxes and stuff him way in the back of their closets, in the back of their memories, in the back of their hearts. And they don't even go to him at all until something life-altering is about to happen. And then they try to wipe the dust off of their God boxes to ask God to do just this one thing for them. And then when it doesn't happen and all of a sudden God is ineffective or absent. Why have you forsaken me, God? Where were you, God? Why did you leave me, God? That's why I don't go to church. Because when I pray, God doesn't even answer. So, they conclude in their minds that there is no space for God in their busy life with their huge problems and their scattered dreams. And I'm sure that some of these people have come across one of my posts or one of my vlogs about trying to conceive. And a few minutes in, I'm sure that they've thought to themselves, what does God have to do with trying to conceive? Where does God fit into conception? What does God have to do with this? And I'm sure that there was a whole lot of confusion swirling around their heads as they tried to determine why this girl was comparing trying to conceive with having trust and faith in God. See, they can't wrap their heads around the idea that God even cares about the trying to conceive process. They can't imagine that he would have any interest in the matter because, after all, God is only necessary when there is something big going on. Such a small problem as infertility and waiting while trying to conceive is nothing to big old God. So where does God come in during this process? Where does such a big God fit into such a big problem? What does God have to do with trying to conceive? See, here's the thing. We want to blame God for our miscarriages and blame God for us losing our children. And we want to hold it against him and punish him because we didn't get what we wanted. What I didn't realize when I was going through, because I was so mad, I was so broken, I was so depressed, I didn't realize that all things happen for a reason. There's an extremely simple and seemingly awful thing to say about losing a child, about miscarrying, but it is so completely true that we often choose to forget that fact because it hurts so bad. The thing is, God knows and sees all things. And these things happen to us and we don't know why, but the whole time while we are looking at the present and stuck in the past, God is looking at our future. What we go through in our present is to prepare us for our future. When I lost my baby, all I knew was that hurt. All I knew was that I was sad and lost and broken and that I was no longer a mother. That's what I did know. What I didn't know, and what God had known all along, was that the day that we found out that I had miscarried our child, our car broke down with us in it. What would we have done if we had had a baby with us in that broken down car, stuck in the city of Atlanta to wait hours for AAA to pick up the car and for my sister-in-law to pick us up? What I didn't know was that barely a month later, my husband would be laid off from his job. We already had no savings. So with only one income, and my income wasn't much, I worked in a wing place. How were we going to pay for prenatal care? Vitamins, checkups, maternity clothes, the hospital bill? And how the devil were we going to pay for a baby in less than 7 months? Diapers, formula, food? How is that going to happen? What I didn't know was that there would be months that year when we would not be able to make our rent, slipping into overdraft like a hot bath, weeks that we had to go on a $20 budget, and when we finally did get a car, that $20 had to not only take care of food for 2 weeks, but also gas. What I didn't know was that later on that year, when my husband had finally gotten a new job, and it was December, and by then we would have had our baby. What I didn't know was that he would get laid off from that job as well. I didn't know back in March or April when I miscarried that by December of that year, we wouldn't have enough money to feed ourselves, let alone to feed, clothe, and care for a newborn. I didn't know that I wasn't ready. But God did. He knew the whole time. He saw when we got pregnant, and he knew that it wasn't time yet. And when I lost my baby, he was there. Even though I didn't see him, even though I ignored him, he was there. And when I finally cried out for him, when I searched for him and couldn't find him, I didn't even realize that he had been speaking to me, whispering love and encouragement right in my ear the entire time. I just wouldn't open my ears to listen. So often, we don't want to include God in our journey of trying to conceive. We don't think that he will care, or we don't think that he will listen, or we don't think that he will be there. Or maybe we just can't handle hearing him tell us that we're not ready. I wasn't ready or willing to hear that I wasn't ready. It took me months to realize and accept that. The thing is, we want to exclude God and walk around with our woe is me's and I can't get pregnant and I've been trying for X amount of time and it still hasn't happened. God has forsaken me. Rather than admit that we aren't ready or that we can't get ourselves pregnant and that we can't breathe life into our own nostrils and the nostrils of our unborn children. Rather than admit that we don't have control over the situation. We don't have control over our conception. We don't have control over the process. Rather than admit that, we want to blame it all on God so that people will pity us and feel sorry for us. And what we don't want to admit is that deep down we are wishing that God will hear all of that negative press, because our doubting God in our infertility will encourage other people to do the same. And we think that he'll look down and he'll give us our miracle babies just to save his name and win favor in our social crowds again. But what we don't realize is that inviting God into our conception process is admitting that we can't do it on our own. For a long time, I didn't think that God had anything to do with my fertility. I thought that I made all of the choices, all of the decisions. My body, my decision. So I took birth control and made plans, and I made all of the decisions. But where did that get me? See, this isn't about birth control being evil or medicine being ineffective. It was about where my faith lied. And it lied in myself. And all that got me was 8 months of hormones and heavy bleeding and a whole lot of tears. And when I decided that I was ready, it was too late. I didn't know that though, because I had made the decision to trust in myself and to have a child when I planned to do so. And yet, when I lost a child, a part of me wanted to blame God. You did this to me. You took my baby. Yet, last I checked, I was the one overworking myself. I was the one picking up furniture and deciding that because I wasn't ready at that time, it wasn't going to happen. And when it all came crashing down, I was faced with one last question. Where's your faith? Who do you trust in? Who do you believe? Where do you get your hope? Where do you get your joy? After having faith in myself for so long, I started to realize that maybe I didn't have as much control as I thought. And that didn't make me weak. Not like I had feared it would do so for so long. It made me free. Once I realized that I couldn't do it alone, that I didn't have all of the control, that I didn't want all of the control, I was free. Free from the burden of perfection and self-reliance and emptiness. Once I made that decision to put my faith and my fertility in God's hands, I was never alone again. Even in my lowest moments, I knew that I wasn't alone. And I didn't have to be afraid anymore. I didn't have to fear what would happen if I got pregnant outside of my own planning. I didn't have to fear finances or needs or the high expectations that come with having a child. I was free. That's where God fits into fertility. He doesn't fit. He's too big for our small expectations and dreams. He has already crafted a story and an ending bigger and better than we could ever dream of. God cannot fit into the box of our expectations. How could he? He created us, and he creates our children, and before they are even a thought in the back of our minds, he has met them and loved them and created them specifically for us. I finally realized that I had created my own child based off of what I'd seen other people have, off of my own expectations, my own understanding. But God, he created a child specifically for me. A child that has a purpose bigger than I could even dream of. I don't want a child like anybody else's. I want that child. That special child created just for me. And I wasn't able to see that until I allowed myself to see God. Until I stopped blaming him and doubting him and sometimes hating him. When I finally allowed myself to see God and experience God, and I opened myself up to God, I was finally able to see. See, God is a parent too. He's a father. He's our father. And during my journey of trying to conceive, I was finally able to realize a few things. God created us. He cared for us and loved us and planned these great, prosperous lives for us, knowing that we wouldn't love him back, not for a while, knowing that we would ignore him and blame him and doubt him. But no matter how much we pushed him away, he knew that our destiny was greater, and he forgave us, and he waited on us, just like we wait for our children. Some people gave their lives to God at 10 years old, some at 20, some not until 30 or 40 or 50, and so on. Some don't get saved until they're on their deathbed, and God waits the whole time. God waited 15 years for me to see him, and then another year or two for me to start trusting him. But God kept on waiting for me. Just like he waited for you, or continues to wait for you. Just like we wait for our children. And when we finally come home to God, when we finally love Him and trust Him enough and give our lives over to Him, we are born again. Just like our children are born into this world, we are born into God's kingdom. Sounds beautiful, doesn't it? But I'm sure that the finer details of it aren't so beautiful. I'm sure that somewhere in God's journey of waiting for us, there were tears and low points, and I'm sure that there was a lot of pain. Just like when we wait for our children. But the destination makes every tear during the journey worth it. Every cramp, every drop of blood, every month spent waiting. It is all worth it when your baby comes home. Yet we don't think that God gets it. We don't think that He understands our journey. We think that our waiting is too small and unimportant to God. And yet He waited on us first. God is there during our waiting period. He always has been, always will be. And so I guess the question, the most important one, where is your faith? In God or in yourself? And where do you get your joy? From knowing that the plan that God has for you, the plan crafted before you were even a spot in your mother's uterus, knowing that that plan is greater than anything that you yourself could ever dream of? Or from yourself, who is subject to emotions and nature and who has a tendency to be utterly wrong most of the time? Where is your hope? In yourself or in God?